All right, so AIM 9.9 Crusades, what were they and what were its impacts? You guys answered the do now question, so away we go here. All right, I will give you a second. All right, so in order to tell this story, you really have to go back and talk about the relationship between different religions. So it's important to understand that at this time, the Islamic Empire, which we've talked about in the Golden Ages unit, is continuing to expand. Okay, so this is kind of running concurrent with that time period that we've already studied. Okay, this is kind of another chapter of that same kind of story. So the Muslim Empire is expanding, and it's starting to stretch into what was Byzantine territory and control of what's called the Holy Land. The Holy Land is what is present day Israel, essentially, including Jerusalem. So the patriarch and the emperor of the Byzantine Empire need help. So what they do is they contact the Pope. Now, let's remember, the Byzantine Empire at this time is Eastern Orthodox religion, and they just got into a big argument with the Roman Catholics, if you remember, and we had the Great Schism, right? But now it's time to put those differences aside, and they all need to kind of come together in the name of Christianity. So even though they're two different branches of Christianity, they're going to put their differences aside to team up against the Muslims. That's really what this story is all about. So the Byzantine emperor asks the Pope for help, send troops, send an army. And we know about the feudal system, and we know who that army is made up of. We know it is the Knights of the Manors, right? So the king will summon the knights from the manors and then assemble an army and send that army to the Byzantine territory to team up with the Byzantine Empire to fight off Muslim invaders. That is kind of the background story here. All right, I'll give you a second here. So when we say Crusades, we're talking about a whole series of wars. This isn't, Christians and Muslims going and fighting one war against each other. This is kind of an on-again, off-again conflict that's going to last 200 years or so. So depending on how you count them, some people will tell you there's 7 or 8 separate wars, so 7 or 8 separate Crusades. So other people will tell you there's 11, 12, 13 of them, depending on who you ask. So this is a series of wars fought between Christians and Muslims for the control of the Holy Land. That is what the Crusades are, plain and simple. Now, this does bring together rulers kind of from across Europe in a common cause. So there is more cohesion amongst these kingdoms and amongst these separate territories of Europe during the Crusades than there had been for a long time in the Middle Ages. We talked about how each kingdom is kind of its own entity, and even each manor within a kingdom is kind of its own entity. But now, because of their common cause of the Crusades, it's bringing these rulers together like it hasn't in a really long time, probably since the Roman Empire. Okay, last slide. I mean, I don't even think I really need to pause it, but so there's a couple of important impacts of the Crusades. Let's remember cultural diffusion. We usually think of cultural diffusion as occurring during positive interactions between cultures, so trade or, some kind of under peaceful means, for lack of a better term. But we have to remember that cultural diffusion can occur as a result of negative events also, including warfare. The Crusades is an example of that. So even though they're fighting against each other, there's a lot of spread of new ideas between East and West. Muslim Empire, Islamic Empire representing the East, and the Christian side of it representing the West. So there's a lot of cultural diffusion and exchange of ideas between those two sides. That is you can make an argument that is a positive impact. It's also going to lead to a huge increase in trade because one side gets kind of a demand for the stuff from the other. This is going to increase trade. So it's a sharing of new ideas, but it's also a sharing of new resources and manufactured goods between the two sides that they hadn't traded before. So there's a huge increase in trade, and this is going to have positive impact on the economies of both the Mediterranean world, which is kind of the story of the whole next unit. The Mediterranean world and Asia also, so are going to have positive impacts. Obviously, the negative here is this is going to set the stage for religious intolerance between several different groups for a really, really long time. The tricky part here is the focus of the Crusades is control of the Holy Land, and there's really three different religions that all call the Holy Land home. It is the Christians, it is the Jews, and it is the Muslims. So, and this warfare between Christians and Muslims over a place that the Jews also claim as their own leads to significant intolerance amongst these groups that exists even to this day. And you guys, I think, are aware of a lot of that. So these are the important effects. So, again, stretching our brains, there are, this is a whole 200 years worth of warfare, but you could take some positives out of it. And that's these things. And obviously there are plenty of negatives that are mostly self-evident.